right, so welcome back everybody to our latest episode of The Nest. After a very eventful divisional round, we now have 4 teams remaining in the hunt for Super Bowl 57, and we have 2 terrific matchups coming up this Sunday, and we will discuss both of these games. And joining me for today's episode are Anirban Chakraborty and Rohan Venkatesh. How is everyone doing?
Championship weekend. How could it get better than this? Well, I guess it could get better 2 weeks from now when we have the Super Bowl, but sure. I'm sure y'all get the point.
And if the Patriots were actually playing, right?
Yeah, that's another thing. I think that'll take a few years, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. No, it's season's coming to an end now. Lots to discuss, and yeah, let's get to it.
Yeah, and before we do talk about the games, let's just talk about the big Patriots news, though, because this is huge news. Bill O'Brien was hired by the Patriots to be the offensive coordinator after the disastrous 2022 showing with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. So quickly, I just want to talk about this because this is big Patriots news. Obviously, I like the hire. I think Bill O'Brien and Mac Jones, they have some history because Bill O'Brien was the Alabama offensive coordinator. He actually came the year after Mac Jones was there, but Mac Jones and Bill O'Brien actually worked together. I think leading up to the NFL draft in 2021. So there's already some history of them working together. Obviously, Bill O'Brien was with the Patriots for a while. He was the offensive coordinator in the early 2000s up to 2011, I believe, when he left to become the head coach at Penn State. So overall, I think it's a good hire. I think Bill O'Brien really knows the offense well. And if it's just for the record, Rob Gronkowski, the former star tight end for the Patriots, he highly endorsed Bill O'Brien recently and said that Bill O'Brien encouraged him to play some of the best football of his career. And Gronk was a Hall of Fame tight end. So I'm excited about the hire, and I think Mac Jones will do very well under Bill O'Brien and have a big rebound in 2023.
Now, I've been critical of ownership in the past. I've been critical of the Patriots overall as a team. But in this case, I got to give credit where credit is due. And I definitely do think that choosing an offensive coordinator who does have history with Mac Jones, and I mean that in a good way, I would say that they definitely did this with Mac in mind. And I really don't think they would have done this if they really had envisioned putting in, say, maybe a Bailey Zappi or potentially shopping around on the free agent market. I don't know. Those of you who were speculating a week ago that someone by the initials of TB12 could come back, right? I think we can all put that to rest now. I think this team is fully invested in Mac as I think it should be, and I'm looking forward to see where our offense goes in the years forward. I really think it has very few places to go but up, considering just how bad this last year was. But you know we'll have to give it a see. Look and see and test it out. How this goes. I have said in the past that for the Patriots, rebuilding is going to be a long process, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're going to try many things along the way. Some things are going to work, some things aren't. And if this is one of the things that works, then the Pats can build on that. If not, then they can always choose another path. But I think this is progress, and I'll give credit to the ownership here.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people thought that this was going to be the most likely outcome because, of course, Bill O'Brien has a history of Patriots from 2007 to 2011 in the offensive coaching, either as an assistant or head offensive coordinator. And we know that Bill Belichick really prefers to stick to his circle, so I don't think there's anyone raising eyebrows about this. And, you know, I think that it's like Rohan said. I mean, I think it is a sign that they are trying to find a good situation for Mac to be in, and who better than the person at Alabama with whom he just really excelled, right? And I mean, of course, college game, and he was playing with players like Jalen Waddle, but you just look at how many deep throws he was making, and kind of aggressive plays that we just didn't see this kind of season from the Matt Patricia, Joe Judge offense. So I'm pretty excited for that. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff circulating on the media how Bill O'Brien's the one OC that Brady played with who we never won a Super Bowl under. And I want to like kind of put that to rest or dispel for 2 reasons. One is that if we do make it to 2 Super Bowl finals and like lose them like we did under his watch, I would consider that to be a very successful tenure of anyone with this current Patriots team. So let's not forget that. And the second thing is, even if you take out Tom Brady's year in 2008 when he had that really horrific injury and Matt Castle filled in, Patriots still finished in the league 10th in passing, 6th in rushing, 9th in total touchdowns, right? Not too bad for having a backup quarterback come in and take over for that offense, right? And of course,
by the way, Bill O'Brien was not, sorry to interrupt, but Bill O'Brien wasn't the offensive coordinator until 2011. So
yeah, but
Josh
he was
McDaniels was the offensive coordinator.
Right. Yeah. My point is he was involved in the staff, right? That's where the whole history part comes in. But my point being, he was still part of a pretty successful offense, even when Tom Brady, or especially considering that Tom Brady was out. So, I think it makes a lot of sense for where this team's at right now. They're clearly not moving on from Bill Belichick. So at this point, give him the OC that he wants. At least this is someone who actually has offensive coordinating experience. So, yeah, I'd say I'm coming into the season pretty optimistic.
Yeah, and I just also like to add to that because he was the Houston Texans head coach for, I think, 6-7 years from 2014 until 2020. And actually, he got fired in 2020. But he did a really good job overall in Houston. I mean, prior to the Texans drafting Deshaun Watson, the Texans went to the playoffs with Brian Hoyer at quarterback and Brock Osweiler. Those were the two quarterbacks who, with under Bill O'Brien's watch, the Texans were able to make the playoffs. I think Mac Jones is definitely a better quarterback than Hoyer and Osweiler. So I think overall it should be a pretty interesting situation. I will like the Patriots to still add a wide receiver this offseason to really kind of complement Jacoby Myers and Devontae Parker. Myers is, of course, a restricted free agent, so that'll be someone the Patriots, I hope, can retain. But I think Hunter Henry is poised to have a big year, and maybe Bill O'Brien will find a way to help Jonnu Smith's productivity as well. So I think overall it's a good hire. It is a little disappointing that it came 1 year kind of later than we were hoping after Josh McDaniels went to Las Vegas. But, at least Mac Jones now, like, I think the ceiling is sort of set. I think the chips are now in place for Mac Jones to have his best year. And really, this upcoming season, there's no more excuses for him. So this is going to be a huge year for the Patriots organization. They're going to have to really see if Mac Jones is their guy. And the reason it matters is because right now Mac Jones is going to enter his third season, and usually in the fifth season you have to wonder whether or not you want to pick up the fifth-year option on him. So I think this year is going to be big to determine whether or not the Patriots actually want to pay Mac Jones and they view him as a long-term starter going forward. So I think overall they're doing the right things. I like the Bill O'Brien hire, and I'm excited by the move. So I'm glad about that. So hopefully next year around this time, we're talking about Bill O'Brien and the Patriots in the spot, and that they're still alive at this time of the year. So let's hope for that. But anyways, in the meantime, since that is hopefully for next year, let's move on and talk about the NFC Championship game, which is the first game on the slate on Sunday. So it's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers, 3 p.m. Eastern. The Eagles beat the Giants 38-7. And the 49ers beat the Cowboys 19-12. So to set up this matchup, I mean, I think the Eagles-Giants game, it kind of went the way a lot of people were sort of expecting. Philadelphia was just the better team. They just cruised. Jalen Hurts, I mean, he had 154 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Kenneth Gainwell, 12 carries, 112 yards, a touchdown. Miles Sanders, 17 carries, 90 yards. And the Eagles pretty much just got up early and just dominated the game. Giants never really came close at all to threatening the Eagles at all this time. So that was sort of my takeaway. And in the 49ers-Cowboys game, that was actually a pretty close game overall, but ultimately the 49ers defense prevailed, and the Cowboys kind of made some questionable calls at the end, but I think overall the 49ers were the better team. So that's sort of going to be how I sort of look at it. But for me, like, let's just talk about this matchup. So Rohan, what's sort of the key matchup for this game for you? Like, what are you going to sort of look for?
I think this is really one of those like really close to call kind of matchups, right? Because both are very similar on offense, very similar on defense. I mean, to be specific over here, the 49ers average 26.8 points a game, whereas the Eagles average 28.6 a game. They're fourth place and second place, respectively speaking, on offense. If you look at defensively in terms of points allowed, Niners on average, they allow 16.4 points a game to 19.5 points for the Eagles, and they're first and sixth respectively. So I guess you could say that for the Eagles, they're taking on the number one defense in the league. So they're going to have their work cut out for them. But the Eagles do have the number two offense in the league. So you got your number two offense against the number one defense. It's going to be a hell of a matchup. Even if you look at other metrics, or even if you look at their rushing offense, I mean, in terms of how many yards per carry that they get on average, the Niners and Eagles are dead even at 4.7 yards per carry. So there's really not really much to separate them over there. The only place where there might be a little bit of separation is opponent rush yards allowed per carry. The Niners on average allowed 3.4 yards, putting them at second place, whereas the Eagles on average they allow 4.7 yards, putting them at 24th. So I guess if there is one place where you'd say that there's a little bit more of a disparity, it would be over there. But that's one area, and I would say that the Eagles probably know this as well, and I would look to I would look for the aerial game more. I think this game is going to be fought more in the air rather than on the ground, precisely because of that. And if you're the Eagles, you want to be passing as much as possible. So I'd be looking for Jalen Hurts to be getting a lot of work in this matchup, right? So I mean, he had a great showing against the Giants. He pretty much beat them in a submission last time, and it wasn't even close. I mean, I was expecting the Giants to at least put up a fight, but that didn't really happen. I mean, and also the 49ers pass defense is 11th in the league. So I mean it's decent, but it's not up there. I mean, on average they allow 6.4 yards per opponent's passing attempt, whereas the Eagles have the number one pass defense in terms of yards allowed per attempt at 5.4 yards per attempt. So if you look at it in all sorts of ways, offense, defense, the teams are pretty evenly matched. The Eagles have a slight disadvantage on the rush, but they have the massive advantage when it comes to pass defense. But if you combine that with the fact that the Eagles are playing at home, they've looked pretty much unstoppable over at the Link. So this definitely leads to advantage Eagles, and of course Jalen Hurts has been on fire. And of course, but on the other end for the 49ers, Brock Purdy is a sensational storyline in and of itself. So no matter how this game goes, I mean, there's going to be a lot of storylines and a lot of things to look for.
Yeah, and you were talking about the Eagles sort of like offense, and sort of like to add to that. Like, I think the Eagles have two dynamic playmakers in Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, and of course you also have to add in Dallas Goedert, who scored a touchdown on Saturday against the Giants. So, I mean, they have three dynamic playmakers for Jalen Hurts to go to. And I think that's something we really saw kind of hurt Dallas last week. And besides CeeDee Lamb, no other player on the Cowboys after Tony Pollard got injured was really able to kind of make an impact the way we sort of hoped. Actually, besides Dalton Schultz, who also made some mistakes at the end. So Dalton Schultz and CeeDee Lamb were there. But I think Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, and Dallas Goedert combined with Gainwell and Miles Sanders. I mean, I think that's a very potent offense for Philadelphia. And I think the 49ers are going to have their hands full trying to deal with the Eagles offense. And of course, you have to consider this too. The Eagles offensive line is one of the best in the league. Jason Kelsey leading the way. They have a terrific offensive line with Lane Johnson.
That offensive line is going to be pitted against a good San Francisco defense, which is pretty much up there. They have, as I mentioned before, they have the massive advantage in terms of rush defense, but they also have Nick Bosa, who leads the league with 18.5 sacks. So take a load of that. So
don't forget Dre Greenlaw too, who's also an outstanding player.
So this prepare for this to have all sorts of twists and turns. Either way, I think it's going to be a pretty good fight.
Yeah, if the divisional round playoffs were any indication, I think the most useful data would probably come from the Niners Cowboys, just because you mentioned the Giants game was so lopsided. But if we remember, actually, the Niners didn't have the easiest time scoring against the Cowboys. I mean, a lot of their early possessions were punts, and ended up putting up 19 points with one touchdown, and of course had that miraculous George Kittle catch that really, I think, ultimately sealed the deal. But like you mentioned, I mean, Eagles pass rush is really devastating. I mean, they have, I think, 4 players on their pass rush who each have double-digit sacks, which is just, I mean, that's just remarkable. That just tells you pretty much every player on that team is a player to watch for Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy did get hit 4 times by the Cowboys pass rush, though that only did lead to 1 sack. So I think seeing how he performs under that kind of constant pressure is going to be really important. And I think the other thing to point out too is that the Niners really benefited from the Cowboys becoming really one-dimensional, especially once Tony Pollard had that really unfortunate injury. Because after that I mean, we saw Zeke have 10 carries for 26 yards. That's really, he was a leading rusher. After that, you just put endless pressure on Dak Prescott, who, wasn't able to deliver in that moment. So that's going to be a very big difference against the Eagles, who are really firing on all cylinders. And for the first time in a while, their offense is reasonably healthy, especially like the players like Sanders, like Kenneth Gainwell, of course, the wide receivers that you mentioned. So to me, I think the ultimate battle for me is actually going to go down to the Eagles pass rush against Brock Purdy. How well can they kind of protect him in the pocket so he can make the throws that we've seen him make, like really important, but also like how much can he kind of continue doing the right things, not really making a lot of mistakes. He's really no picks, and he had a pretty low QBR all said and done against the Cowboys, but it was a pretty clean game in terms of no turnovers or like things from him or from the other team, really. So I think if they can make him play a clean game, kind of like a Joe Burrow-esque game, except on like maybe a little lower level where you're doing all the right things and you're able to protect the ball from the Eagles pass rush, that would be a good recipe for success.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the 49ers run game too, I think it's going to be important against this Eagles pass rush to get it established. Unfortunately for the 49ers, they have two dynamic guys who can really take off at running back. They have Christian McCaffrey, of course. Elijah Mitchell is really good too. And of course, Deebo Samuel, we've seen him from time to time also take handoffs and turn them into big gains. So I think overall, the 49ers have a very potent offense. Their offense is probably still the best remaining offense in terms of just pure talent. I mean, you have George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. Those four are just outstanding playmakers. So I think the 49ers have plenty of chances to basically score points, but I think they're going to have to score more than 19 to win this game, because I don't think Philadelphia is going to be as I don't think Philadelphia is going to be as sort of like weak on offense as Dallas kind of showed on Sunday. So that's going to be sort of the key matchups. But let's talk about the predictions now. So I'll go first. So this is kind of a tough one. I think overall the 49ers, Brock Purdy has yet to lose a game. But I think this Eagles team is just very dynamic. And being at home, I think that they're going to be able to beat the 49ers 24-16. So I have the Eagles going to the Super Bowl 57. That's going to be my NFC pick. Let's hear everyone else's.
It hurts for me to say this as a Pats fan, but fly Eagles fly 27-23.
Was there a pun intended because you said Hurts, like Jalen Hurts?
Yep. Yep. 27-23. That's what I got. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be slightly higher scoring than what the betting lines are suggesting. I mean, the betting lines are suggesting that the over under be 46 points, and it's having the spread at 2.5. It's still favoring Philly. I think it's going to be a pretty close game. Maybe not as close as what the betting lines are predicting. But because I think that there's that being at home is going to provide a little bit more of a decisive edge for Philly. And of course, the Eagles are going to find a way to play in the air a lot more than on the ground. And I think it's going to be a big game for Jalen Hurts, and 27-23 looks about right to me.
Yeah, I've got to say I agree with you guys. I think the Eagles have just been really the talk of the NFC this whole season, and I do think Brock Purdy's going to give them a run for their money, but at the end of the day, I just think their pass rush is just too good to not pressure him and possibly force him to make mistakes or rely on the run game to that extent. So, and I don't think they can beat the Eagles alone with their run game. So I'm going to say that it's going to be a final score of 17-12 Eagles.
Oh, you're going low scoring. Okay. I mean, I guess I'm going with my pick, partially because I've been burned in the past picking underdogs, especially in that Ravens Bengals game. I picked the Ravens in that one. That did not go very well, and of course I also picked the Cowboys. That did not go well either. So I've kind of learned that the favorites are favorites for a reason, and the Eagles.
Well, you picked the Cowboys to beat the. Did you pick Dallas to beat Tampa too?
No. I had Tampa beating to beat the Cowboys, so I got that one wrong, and then I falsely thought, okay, if they can beat Tom Brady, they can beat anyone. So I was like, okay, I'm all in on Dallas. And then I thought that they would win again. And of course, they of course did not. So but in that case, Cowboys were the underdog. So I guess I have to tip my cap and admit some humility to the Vegas bookmakers, because it seems like they know what they're doing.
Well, that said, that's a good transition to our other matchup now, the Bengals and the Chiefs, because the Bills were the favorites, right, against Cincinnati. But
Yes, and I had the Bills that time. So I guess you could say I messed up on both ends. I've favored the underdog when the favorite won, and I favored the favorite when the underdog won. So I've been right in both ways. I've been wrong in both ways, and there's really no consistent pattern. So if you look at it that way, maybe there's a little bit of learning to do in how to get these picks right.
yeah, but anyways, I mean, let's just talk about this matchup now. So, I mean, the Chiefs beat the Jaguars 27-20, and the Bengals, of course, beat the Bills 27-10 in Buffalo. I mean, that was a very shocking game just altogether. I had picked the Bills too, but I think overall, let's just talk about this. This is obviously the rematch of Week 13, which was in Cincinnati. This, of course, is at Kansas City Arrowhead Stadium. But in the Week 13 matchup, the Bengals won that matchup 27-24. Joe Mixon actually didn't play that day, but it was Samaj Pirine who had 21 carries for 106 yards. And Burrow had 286 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jamar Chase had a big game, 7 catches on 97 yards. Mahomes did okay, 16 of 27 for 223 yards and a touchdown that day. But overall, I mean, I think the big kind of like note you took from the Chiefs Jaguars game was that Patrick Mahomes has a high ankle sprain. And of course, he did say today that he will be ready to go, but there's no question in mind that he's going to be limited. In what way will he be limited on Sunday? We don't know, but he's definitely not going to be 100%. And that is kind of huge for Kansas City because they've already had trouble dealing with Cincinnati, even when Mahomes was healthy. So this is going to be the main
they're still yet to
storyline.
beat Joe Burrow. That's the most unbelievable part. And that's with Patrick Mahomes. And yeah, they're saying they're going to have Patrick Mahomes for Sunday, but I have my own doubts about that. And even if he is, who knows if he's going to be? I don't think he's going to be at 100%. And even if he even if he does does play, I mean, this Chiefs team is great. They're really, really good. Don't get me wrong, but they look vulnerable. And this Bengals team is ascending. The question is, are they ascendant enough to take down the juggernaut? That's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also just worth noting because when Mahomes had that high ankle sprain, he actually came out of the game initially, and Chad Henne came in, and at the 2-yard line, he led a 98-yard scoring drive, which ended with a 1-yard touchdown pass to Travis Kelce. So Travis Kelce is going to be the big player for the Bengals to really watch out for again. I mean, he had 14 catches for 98 yards against the Jaguars. I mean, he was excellent. And I mean, they also have Jerick McKinnon. They have Isaiah Pacheco. They had at running back, both of the running backs are pretty good. They have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster. So Kansas City has a pretty good balanced offense besides Kelce. But Kelsey's going to be the main player for Cincinnati to watch out for because if you're not careful with Kelce, he'll probably have like 15 catches, 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. We've seen him go off for these performances. Even at the age of 33, it's just remarkable. So, I mean, that's going to sort of be the key matchup I'm sort of looking for. How does the Cincinnati defense kind of contain Mahomes again? They've done it before, but this is going to be a different level. Obviously, they did it last year in the playoffs, but I think Mahomes is obviously eager for some revenge. Of course, he hasn't beaten Burrow yet, but he definitely has heard that storyline, and he wants to get back to that Super Bowl following 2020 when he lost to Tampa and Brady. So I think it's going to be a lot of things that are sort of storylines that are being dealt here. I mean, Mahomes is likely winning the MVP, but Burrow is going for a second straight Super Bowl appearance. So it'll be interesting, sort of like that's going to be the big storyline. But I think for Cincinnati, it'll also be worth kind of seeing. I think Cincinnati compared to, I was critical of how they played against the Ravens. They did win that game, but they looked sloppy. But against Buffalo, it was just sheer domination. They just dominated Josh Allen. Stephon Diggs had 4 catches for 35 yards. I mean, he has been one of the best wide receivers in the league, and they held him to 4 catches and 35 yards. That was just remarkable. And I mean, Joe Mixon was good. He scored a touchdown. Jamar Chase, Hayden Hurst each had touchdowns. Burrow was just poised the whole time. He was never flattered at all. And I think that's sort of going to be the key takeaway from this game. I don't think Burrow gets intimidated from that moment. And I think that's what's going to make this matchup so good, because Mahomes and Burrow are kind of both similar demeanors. They're both kind of ready for that big moment. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of my sort of takeaway from this weekend. Like, I mean, I think Cincinnati just like went into Buffalo and just dominated. So yeah, that was just very impressive.
Yeah, and
Norm,
just to
sorry,
add
go.
to that, oh yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I think one of the best things that the Bengals have been good at is knowing how to design plays for their receivers to get open. And I think that was a fundamental difference between the Bills and the Bengals, right? You mentioned Stephon Diggs having 4 catches of 35 yards. He was targeted 10 times, which, a couple of those were pretty off by Josh Allen standards. But you look at the difference there versus Jamar Chase. How many times in last year's postseason did we say, oh, this team's going to double team Chase? They're going to double team Chase and take him out of the game. The Buffalo Bills did that too, and he still ended up getting 50 plus yards and a touchdown, right? And even against the Chiefs, he had like I think 97, almost like pretty close to a century in receiving yards. So the Bengals have really an optimal situation where they have, like you said, a QB who just doesn't really make mistakes that much, right? He just doesn't. He was actually, in terms of targeting Jamar Chase against the Chiefs the last time, he was 7 for 8, right? So that tells you that the plays were designed to get Jamar open, and Joe Burrow was able to find him when it mattered most, right? So to me, I think that's what really strikes me about the Bengals offense, just that they're pretty mistake free on terms of the receiving side. And then of course in rushing, Samaj Perine is really their pass catching back, just like on the other hand, Jerick McKinnon, who has had a real resurgence in the late season for the Chiefs, catching multiple touchdowns, getting 50 plus receiving yards multiple games to end the season. But at the end of the day, I think that's kind of what it comes down to. I think these are going to be both high octane performances. And keep in mind, yeah, the Bengals had an injured O line that ended up just allowing 3 QB hits and 1 sack on Joe Burrow against Buffalo. And even if there was an absent, I mean, Joe Burrow's proven really outside the Super Bowl against the Rams. Outside of that, he's been able to play through 6-7 sacks, no problem, including against the Chiefs last year in the playoffs. So to me, what that really highlights is that, I mean, I think the Chiefs are going to come at this with motivation. I think the Bengals are going to come at it with motivation, right? I think both teams, I mean, I don't question the motivation here. These are teams that have a budding rivalry, QBs that have a budding rivalry. At this point in the AFC, I think it's pretty fair to say Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes are really the top two who we can see battling it out. So I'm predicting a high scoring game where both of them are going to show up. Though, of course, like you mentioned, Patrick Mahomes is going to be limited with his legs, but nevertheless, let's not forget he still drove down and got a touchdown, jumping on his wrong foot when it mattered most against the Jaguars. So they're not going to be a pushover, but I still think I see Joe Burrow playing mistake-free football, getting Jamar Chase active, getting his best players available, and that's why I predict that the Bengals are actually going to beat the Chiefs 37-34.
Wow. I mean, I actually completely disagree with your assessment that it's going to be a high scoring game. I think that normally this would be heavy advantage Chiefs, for 2 reasons. I mean, the Chiefs have the number 1 offense of the league at 29.1 points per game. Obviously, there's a caveat to that because that's when Mahomes was at 100%. He's obviously not at 100% right now, so you got to throw that in, factor that in. But also, the Bengals, they just can't rush the ball. They average 3.9 yards per carry, which is 29th in the league, which means that they're going to be almost entirely reliant on Joe Burrow to get most of their offense. And most of their offense is going to be in the air and not on the ground. So that's going to make the Chiefs defense's job a little bit easier in terms of planning, planning out their plays. And this is despite the fact that the Chiefs defense is kind of mediocre, right? They average 21.6 opponent points per game, which kind of puts them near the middle of the pack in 15th. But they are at home. That definitely is an advantage. But I think that Mahomes is going to struggle, and Joe Burrow, while he's great, I don't think that something tells me that this magic isn't going to last forever. And something tells me that this is probably where it runs out. I could be wrong about this, but I have a strange feeling that it's going to be lower scoring. Both sides are going to struggle. Both QBs are going to struggle. I'm going to go with 17-16 Chiefs. I think it's going to be awfully close, but I think it's going to be 17-16. but the betting lines would actually be closer to agreeing with you because they had the over under at 46.5. And in terms of the money lines, it's -110, -110, both for Cincy and Kansas City. So it's not really providing a decisive edge for either team. So that's probably after pricing and what happened to Patrick Mahomes in the previous game. So this is probably about as evenly matched as it gets. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals pull it off, because I see it being pretty close as it is right now. But I think that somehow I really think that the Chiefs are probably gonna somehow sneak through, and if they sneak through and get into the Super Bowl, they're gonna get slaughtered against the Eagles.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, I think overall this is going to be two of the best teams remaining in the AFC. I mean, I know Buffalo was the 2 seed, but I think Cincinnati showed that they are better than Buffalo. So I think these are really the two best teams in the AFC. And I think overall, while Cincinnati sort of hasn't been that impressive on the ground, they still have Mixon and Pirine, and Mixon had a great game against Buffalo, 105 yards and a touchdown. And Kansas City sort of struggles against the run. They allowed 140 plus yards against the Jaguars last Saturday. So, I mean, I think that Cincinnati has enough on offense to really move the ball appropriately. And I think that this is going to be a close game, but I also do think that Cincinnati is very hungry coming up just short in the Super Bowl last year against the Rams. And I think they're going to win this game at Arrowhead Stadium, and they're going to head to Glendale, Arizona to play the Eagles. I'm going to go Bengals 23, Chiefs 17. So, yeah, I mean, I have Bengals, Eagles.
All right. So I'm the only one who has the Chiefs here. I
Yeah.
never expected that.
And I think
Two
the
people will be
Chiefs
going against the Chiefs.
I mean, Chiefs at this point, I mean, I also think if the Chiefs do make it to the Super Bowl, I don't think that the Eagles are just going to crush them. I mean, the Chiefs still have Patrick Mahomes, and he'll be 2 weeks away from that injury. So if he were to make it to the Super Bowl, I think that the Eagles probably are at a disadvantage, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens on Sunday. I mean, first the Eagles have to win too. So yeah, but that's going to be our matchup. Yeah. We'll be back again next weekend to preview Super Bowl 57. Yeah, finally. Next weekend, we'll be back to have a special preview for Super Bowl 57. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. Enjoy Sunday's games. These are going to be the two really good games.
All right. Peace.
Bye, everybody.